Hey, Dean here, back in the secret underground lair. Working on the Worktable Sawmill. Ran a little speed test and a couple things happened. One, blew a tire. It just went flying right off. So I have to figure out how to glue that onto the wheel. We'll do that on both sides. The other thing I felt a little insecure about was having a locking collar on the outside of the wheel. So I put a locking collar on that one. I'll put a locking collar on this wheel. That'll go right down in here. Just to make sure that the wheel doesn't want to fall off the end of the axle. All right, so here's the plan. I've got a bunch of square tube here. This is 3/4 inch square stock. And I cut off a little piece of it just as an experiment, and I think this is going to work. So we have here two pieces of oak that I've cut that will be used as guides. So you can see that they can move in and out of that to pinch the blade. I'll wind up welding on some nuts here so that I can put a bolt through and keep it taut when it's in the right position. Looking for some metal now to fabricate into the brackets that we're going to use for the blade guides. So I found this piece of metal here, obviously something from a previous project. So I'm going to take this over to my vise, put it in the, get my cutting wheel out, and we're going to cut 1-inch strips out of this piece, the other half of this angle iron here, and then 1 inch out of here and 1 inch out of here. One down, 3 to go. That's 3. There we are, that's all 4 pieces done. Just doing a little bit of cleanup on the metal with the flap disc. A lot easier to work with clean metal than dirty metal, and a lot easier to clean the metal before it's assembled. So we'll just do that before we weld things up. Just like that, nice shiny piece of metal. So do the other 3 pieces and we'll be back when that's done. So we've got our piece, all our pieces now welded into our little square tube. So use the flap disc and smooth it all out. We'll do this final side and we'll call that a day. All right, here's our pieces all cut. We have to drill holes in here, 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 and here in order to make everything mount. We'll weld nuts onto each of those points and then weld these pieces together. This won't be welded, it'll be mounted onto the bottom of the blade block. The wheel block. Okay, drilling holes. Okay, we've got all the pieces now cut for the bearing guides, or blade guides rather. The only piece remaining now is to put the bearing onto these 2 pieces. So I've got a piece marked. It's going to be comprised of 4 little 1-inch pieces, 2 here, 2 here. The bearing will sit between those 2. But before I cut this piece and start fiddling with it and ultimately welding it on, I'm going to drill the 4 holes required for the bearing. So back to the drill press. Alrighty, back from the drill press, the holes are cut. Now we'll go just use a cut-off wheel and cut these into 4 little pieces. Oh, there's the little bearing brackets all cut. And loosely, that's kind of how they're going to sit on the bearing guide. So those brackets will be welded on, of course. The bolt will run through with a little washer between the bearing and the bracket. So I'll weld that up, and we should be able to call these done. At least a little fine tuning after that, but I think we're good. All right, there's our blade guides all complete. Bolted up with the blade guide blocks in place. So the next step will be cutting them all to the appropriate length and mounting these pieces onto the bottom of the bearing of the axle blocks. So I've taken the axle block off the saw beam, and we're getting ready to mount the bracket that holds the blade guide onto the bearing block. So I've got this piece. You can see I've got two small holes drilled. These will be the pilot holes that will be drilled. I'll use that as a guide to go right through the bearing block to provide the pilot holes for the screws. Then I'm going to come back and drill out these larger holes so I can put the screw right through, and then countersink the hole down on the inside so the screw will sit flush with the inside face of that. So I'll get those holes drilled and come back when we're ready to screw it on. Okay, so there's our piece drilled. You can see we have a nice countersink in the bottom of that piece. So our screw will just fit in there nice and snug. I'll just drop that screw in there and show. So there's the screw sitting in that hole, nice and flush with the bottom surface. So that'll prevent any binding of the guide as it slides in and out of that bracket. So let's put it on. All right, there's the bracket attached. The one thing I haven't done yet on this particular bearing block is put in a little stop here. I'm going to put a little plate over top, just the end of this block here, to provide a bearing point for the tensioning system, so I can tighten a bolt down, and that will push the block against that, or push against the metal plate on this block to tighten up the blade. So I'll put that on now. Well, there we have it. Blade guides are now installed. I've got blade guide on this side and blade guide on that side. I'll zoom around here so you can get a better look. So we've got main cross piece. The whole business of the blade guide is resting on this piece here, screwed into our axle block. On a shaft, I can loosen that and adjust this back and forth. Now the piece here comes down. This can be adjusted up and down, and we have adjustment for this piece going in and out. And of course there is adjustment here and here to get the blocks mounted where we want them. And of course get the blocks where we want them to keep the blade exactly taut. And of course there's a bearing here to keep the blade nice and snug from coming back. And the same arrangement on the other side. In addition, we've put on this tensioning system. So this is the plate I was talking about in the last clip. And this is now mounted with bolts going right through the entire beam here. That's the head of the bolt that's here to hold this in place. This being a bolt that can be adjusted with a clamping nut here. So I can turn that to push the whole block out and tension the blade. So the other thing that I did on this, just because I was wanting to make sure the wheels are going to be spinning as nicely as possible, is I added a block to the rear of the wheel so that it is now sandwiched between this piece that clamps onto the axle and this new block on the back. So this is sitting nice and firm. The wheels are running really true. About 1 millimeter of wobble, maybe a little bit less than that. And I have put locking collars on the axles on the front. So everything is held snug in place. And look at this. Are you ready? It runs! It's alive! So the last little bit, I want to put this tire back on that flew off in the last last time I sped it up. Blades are running truer and the wheels are a little better aligned than they were last time around. But I'll put that tire back on. I'm going to put a log on here and we'll actually do a test cut. Unbelievable, we're nearly there. So here's the strategy for putting the tire back onto the wheel. Of course, the tire needs to go in there. I'm going to use some contact cement. So the first step will be putting contact cement around the wheel. I'll probably need to do 2, possibly 3 coats of contact cement on that because the MDF is quite porous. So we'll get the contact cement on there. That'll need some time to set up. I'm going to put contact cement on the tire. Give that time to set up. Now the trick, of course, with all that is as soon as you touch the pieces together, that's it, they're done. And since that's got to be stretched and manipulated quite a bit to get over the wheel, what I'm going to try to do is put some wax paper over top of the wheel before I put the tire on. Stretch the tire over the wheel so that it is, the wax paper sits between the contact cement on the tire and the contact cement on the MDF. Then I'm going to try and lift up the tire just a little bit, like slip a screwdriver in there, and then start pulling out the wax paper and working my way around the wheel to get the thing set in place while the rubber is stretched. I don't know if it's going to work, but we're going to give it a try. So I can tell right away here, I'm going to need a second coat on this MDF of the glue. I'm just going to take you off the stand here and show you what I'm talking about. This portion of the wheel looks quite dry, looks like dry MDF. As the contact cement cures up or sets up, this should have a slight gleam to it. If it doesn't, it means it has been completely absorbed into the MDF. So I'll let this set a little bit further, let it go for about another 10 minutes, then I'll apply a second coat. In the meantime, I'll get on and apply it onto the tire. All right, the glue has had a chance to set. So we'll put a little bit of wax paper around the wheel, just to kind of keep us from having to wrestle with that too much. All right, let's see what happens. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Okay, the tire is more or less in position. Now it becomes the challenge of getting the wax paper out from underneath the tire. Let's see if this theory works. There we are. Tire glued on. Bit of a trick, but it worked. So I'm going to put the blade back on, put a piece of wood on the table saw, on our little sawmill. Let's give it a test. All right, I've got a little piece of mulberry. This is just kind of a sample of the type of logs that I can find pretty readily around my area. So this is just a piece that I've had lying around for a bit, and I'm just gonna cut a little skim off the top. This is the very first cut, unedited. Let's just see what happens. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah, that actually cuts amazing. What went wrong is my little clamp that I've got, or my board here that I've got holding everything down to the table, bumped into this guide. So I'm just going to knock that off. And I'm going to knock the one off on the other side too, because that seemed to bind. So I'll come back when that's done. Alrighty, just trimmed off these little legs that are supporting the log that's in the sawmill. So let's fire it up and go again. Here we are. That is a real-time cut. Very happy with that. We'll drop it down and do another one. Why not? "14 turns represents 1 inch. So going 8 turns should have dropped me down ½ an inch. We'll have to put a handle up there to make this a little better. Looks like we popped a circuit breaker. So the motor appears to have a little safety mechanism that if it gets under too much load, it will just shut off. I'll have to figure out how to push this thing through just at the right speed, possibly find a way to override that setting. But I'm going to keep going for a little bit. Just take it easy, a little piece at a time. Let's see what happens. I'll come back when I have a slab cut off. All right, there it is. The first slab cut off a Worktable Sawmill. How about that? 1/2 inch thick. That's exactly what we're shooting for. I think there's a couple of settings that I need to make within the electronics. It appears that, for example, if the motor gets under a certain amount of load, it'll just cut off. It'll come right back again. So I'm going to try and figure out what that load mechanism is and see if I can find a way to resolve that. Cutting at slower speed seems to work really well, but hey, thumbs up. Woohoo! Hey, subscribe if you'd like to see more of this kind of stuff.